All right, we have another exciting edition of Truth Seekers upcoming on deck here. We got Kimberly joining us. Before we introduce her, we'd just like to remind everybody where you can find Coach Dick and myself, proadvisorcoach.com. And of course, everywhere that you watch your podcasts. YouTube, we got posted video on LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Anchor. And there's literally just dozens of places where you can watch your podcast. We're probably there. Anyways, without further ado, we'd love to welcome Kimberly to the show. Thank you so much for joining us, Kimberly.
Thank you very much for having me, both Coach Josh and Coach Nick. I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah, we're going to have a fun conversation. You and I have caught up a little bit before today, and I know we worked on or talked about some stuff with vision and even motivation. I'm just wondering what maybe your biggest motivation was for, engaging us and coming on the show today.
Well, my biggest motivation really with engaging you all after you contacted with me is I'm on a mission to cure 5,500 women of burnout in honor of my grandmother's legacy. And one of the things to do that is that my business can't be one of the best kept secrets. I need to be out, be verbal, and be present and serve. And so I believe that you all are positioned in a way to allow me to do that so that I can serve more and impact more.
Absolutely. I'm glad to do it. So tell us more about that. Why is that important to you? Why are you passionate about that?
Well, I've witnessed so many women and men as well just have their lives fall apart because of burnout. They're trying to do too much. We're overscheduled, overworked, and we're even doing it to our children. And the very thing that we're working to accomplish destroys our lives in the process. I know I've experienced that 2 or 3 times myself personally until I crafted a solution not to get into that situation again. So that's the main reason why I see people being a coach and both marriage and family therapists, you can really see the destruction that burnout causes. It's an amalgamation of a lot of different symptoms, mindsets, and beliefs that create that.
So important. I mean, Coach Dick and I see that so often in what we do. What was the difference for you? So you mentioned you went through it a couple of times. Maybe it was unique in each scenario, but how did you get over that? How do you navigate something like that?
Well, like you said, yes, it was a couple of times. And a lot of times it was situational changes initially that led to my recovery. It wasn't intentional until this third time, and it actually was the pandemic that led to that. And I noticed I was working 19-hour days because, as you can imagine, those who work in the mental health field, it truly, Coach Nick, I was working 19-hour days. Remember when the cruise ships had all of those people stuck on there and they needed people. And so we were working around the clock, people all over the world, helping to notify loved ones that sometimes their loved ones had passed, and just trying my practice growing and seeing my kids' lives spread apart. I really had to make some strategic and intentional changes. And so that's why. And one of the main things was because I was pre-high cholesterol, pre-diabetic, there was something else, but I changed all of that with diet and exercise because I shun medicine because I know, especially when it's something that I've done to myself, created space in my time so that I don't lead a life like that, where I get enough rest. I schedule 2-hour breaks in my day very intentionally to do whatever I want, whether that's watching TikTok, it's taking a nap, or it's catching up on notes. So I have some free time built in and a lot of support systems.
Congratulations on making that shift and that very intentional change. So it was really cool to hear you say that. Right. And I'm really curious to know what that's done, not only for how you feel about it, but what's that done for your professional life as well, other parts of your life. Like, because the reason why I'm really curious to hear is because I believe that the conventional thinking is that if I start doing less, then other things are going to suffer because I'm not there to do those things. So like my business will suffer, or my relationships will suffer, like people won't get what I need. But I don't think that's true. So I'd love to hear your thoughts of what that's actually changed for you.
Yeah, thank you, Coach Nick. That's an excellent question. I have a whole talk around that. I called it leveling up by shifting down.
Oh,
And
cool.
I I was nervous. I was really afraid to just take this time out and say, I'm not going to see clients. I'm not going to serve. And I can't explain to you how this happened, but my business actually grew more with that. I think that I served better. I showed up better. I know I was definitely less grumpy with my children, uh, and I did things that gave me a lot more energy. Um, I initially started out with making these little elaborate charts in my phone of making sure that, okay, these are my things that give me energy, and these are the things that drain my energy, and trying to make sure I had more. And I was like, okay, I can't keep that up, but I have an idea. So I was just very intentional, and really surprisingly, I got clients that wanted to be supported, those who hire ticket clients, and I did a lot less busy work.
Mm, yep.
Yeah, Coach and I talk about this, or have talked about protecting our time, right? And I think about, I compare it to like college athletes, right? The people who are in sports, they have less time to focus on their academics. They actually perform better. So when you carve out time for yourself in your schedule, you're forced to prioritize the most important things. And you have to let the rest go, or else that's going to creep into the time that you've already carved out for yourself. So there's things that happen that, like Coach was mentioning, and you confirm, Kimberly, that just seems counterintuitive to it, to what the actual goal or result would be. But spending less time actually doing those things makes you prioritize it and makes you be more productive with those things. You find that to be true?
Oh, absolutely. Because I would get into analysis paralysis, right? I'm not even going to tell you how much time I spent when I initially had my first website, and how many months I wasted getting it perfect, and it still wasn't perfect. Or the random, okay, I'm going to spend an hour doing this, but finding, oh, I'm looking at TikTok. Oh, I've opened this email, and I just was not focused when I wasn't more intentional with my time.
I'm curious to know, at the risk of maybe eliminating some of your potential clientele pool, but is a lot of what your work is preventative of these things, or like what are maybe some symptoms you can look out for to beat burnout so that you don't wait till it's here?
Right. So a lot of it, because there's a difference between, right, burnout and stress, right? So we're not getting rid of stress. Stress is not going anywhere. It's very useful for us, and it can be very motivating. But burnout, when you begin to, now let me back up for a second, because people tend to use the words burnout to apply to so many things, to a variety of things. I'm burnout on cookies, I'm burnout on yoga, or whatever it is, but it mainly applies to the work situation. That's what the World Health Organization puts it in a medical classification. So it's mental distance and exhaustion in your work. There's irritability, and just a general feeling of personal inefficiency. So we just talked about doing so much more, but not being personally effective. So when those three merge together, when you begin to see those symptoms, any one of them, that becomes a trigger. So I know my personal triggers. One of my personal triggers is, where are my keys and where are my glasses? That begins to tell me, I know it sounds absolutely silly, but, and the third one is, I'm stopping at McDonald's for a large fry and chocolate chip cookies, that I have let things go. I'm not managing things well. And that kind of alerts me, hey, stop, slow down, do what you need to do. I hope I answered your question.
You did, and that's so important, because I think that is the spiral that can happen, because it's very difficult to get out of that mode, because you go to McDonald's once and then maybe you do it a second time, and then all of a sudden you got a bad habit on your hands, and it's more than burnout. It's burnout leading to other negative things. So
Health
yeah.
issues, that ineffective coping
Mhm.
mechanism. And I had that down. That's why when I really became intentional about addressing my burnout, that's why those 60 pounds just kind of melted off. So instead
Wow.
of me gaining during the pandemic 15, I lost So
That's
that
awesome.
was.
So just for my sake, the glasses and keys, what did that mean? What do you mean by that?
So I lose track of if I'm beginning to experience too much stress, too much burnout. I don't keep track of very important personal things. So my glasses, I need them to see, and they can be on my face or on my head, and I'm like, where are they? Because I'm not being intentional. I'm not noticing things. I'm just acting haphazardly and being not intentional. And my keys are the same way because I need them to go places and do things. And so it's almost like this little self-sabotage stuff. So I think somehow my brain and my body is telling me, you need to stop, slow down, because I can't do anything without my glasses or keys.
I just love that you've identified, when it starts to show up for you. As you were speaking, my mind goes to listen to a podcast a couple weeks ago where it talked about the importance of vision. Okay, and if we're really stressed out, we have tunnel vision with what's right in front of us and what is stressing us out. And when we're in a peaceful state of mind, we see the whole picture. Our whole vision is in our perspective. It's the reason why nature is so important. Or you get to the top of the mountain and you can look out, you just breathe out this sense of relief. So vision for me, that's why I asked about the glasses. It's another trigger for me. Do I know what's in my environment? Like my wall is green. Have I acknowledged that in the last 2 hours? No, I haven't been paying any attention to all these little details that are around me, and just it keeps things in perspective. I might bring Coach Nick in on this. Do you have anything like that? Like, how do you protect yourself from these potentially negative things that can send you down a whole new road?
That's what I was going to ask, actually, Kimberly, for you. Like, what's the? I like the defining a trigger for when this isn't good. Right, but then what do you do with it then? What's the action? Because there has to be something actual action to then spin it back the other way. Right? I remember, like, back in my old days, my corporate days, working in London, working for banks, that I would have vacation coming up, but I'll get myself so worked up about this, like, vacation, and would be like so far down the line that by the time I got there, I needed just a vacation just to prep for the vacation. And like, it'd be too late because you couldn't realize, like, by the time you realize you're burnt out, it's too late, right? And so, like, what's the signs before? But then what do you do that's different? And I couldn't ever get my head around, like, well, okay, now I noticed it, but what do I do about it? Because what do you tell me about that, if you would?
So I get forced to stop, right? Because I start losing my things. And I begin to look at what are the stories and the narratives I'm telling myself about my current situation, and what is my mindset about that. So a lot of time for me, I hear the stories about how good I need to be and how I have to do things bigger, better, faster, and you have to be the best. And sometimes mediocre it can be okay. Good can be okay. And it doesn't. So sometimes there's cereal for dinner. It doesn't have to be a 5-course meal. So that's the first thing. What story am I telling myself about my circumstance and the issues? And is that even accurate? So I have to do a self-check. Looking at first what's going on internally, and then I look at what's going on externally, and where are the truths and falsehoods in those narratives.
And do you just? I'm going to ask specifically because I think, like, the real the method here is so important to apply it, right? It's like, okay, so do you go, oh, where's my keys? I don't know where my keys are. Okay, hold on. I need to go and sit in my special space with a notepad, and I need to sit down and figure out what it is. Is it as structured as that? Or is it like, okay, tomorrow at this set time when I do my morning routine, or I do my end of day routine, that's going to be part of it, I need to set then, or I need to set, is it just on the fly? Like, how do you do it?
So 2 things that I do. First, I stop after I find the things. I stop and I do a little bit of a body scan to close my eyes, and not a real long, deep thing, but what's going on in my body. because that's very telling for me. A lot of times I feel it in my stomach, and then I kind of speak to that and I breathe through that. Then I'll break out my iPad that has my mood journal app and
Mm.
begin to tease apart what are my thoughts. Like I said, what is the narrative, what's the story that I'm telling. And sometimes I know, and other times I discover it through the typing. So that tends to help me a lot, and then go through what's going on externally. So
This is so important because it's everything. You don't think of the body being involved or physiology when you're working on something professionally, but that's where it shows up, right? It's almost like that's the net that catches the burnout. Like there's signs along the way, but then the body gives us this feedback with like, hey, pay attention to me. It's like your subconscious. It's the subconscious's way of getting your attention.
right.
Is how I'm making sense of it. So
Yes.
it's cool to hear you. Like, so first thing I do is I slow down. I tell myself a different story. That's the power of control. Nothing has any meaning except the meaning we give it. That's one of Coach my favorite quote. And then what do we do about how we feel physically? Well, it's trying to tell us something. What is it telling us that we need? And let's go and do that.
Right. And then I break out my comfort kit sometimes, depending on how that's going. And with my comfort kit, it has something for all the five senses, like something for auditory, something for tactile, something visually, and something kinesthetic and auditory. So, and find what is the stimulation that I need at the time to bring me back to a happy space. So, because sometimes it might be so cluttered, and typically a lot of times, sometimes it's the external, and that just centers me and allows all that to come through.
So cool. So cool to hear about your process. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to give you the opportunity. So how to fit this into your business? Maybe share the name of your business. We'd like to hear that and where we can find you. And then like how do you help your clients do this? What might that look like? What's the engagement look like?
Okay. Let's start with, so I can be found at drkimberlywilson.com. And second part of your question.
Yeah, so the name of your company or
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yes. Leadership and Resilience Consultants, and how I help my clients. It usually starts with, sometimes it's a talk. So yesterday I talked with women lawyers of Charlotte, and I had about 5 or 6 women I gave them an offer to connect with me, and we do a Zoom call, and first they have a questionnaire about what they're experiencing, what is their role, what are their goals, and what would they like to be different. So I ask that in various ways, and what are they willing to commit? Because sometimes I discover that although people reach out, they're not really ready to put the work in. And there's no judgment there, because that's sometimes for me, like I know we are all quite brilliant at our ineptitudes. And sometimes I just want to stay in my foolishness. Like, yes, I know it's stupid, but I want to do it right now. So we go through that questionnaire, and I ask them about what's going on and you talked about vision, how do they envision their life being different? What would be the one thing that would really change the trajectory? And a lot of times they say it's one thing, but through the conversation, I can hear that there's a holistic challenge going on. And we try and I kind of envision, shotguns, when you shoot a shotgun, they're just a bunch of pellets on the wall. So I asked them to hone in on which pellets are most important. So not so much as in what I think they need to change, but what they feel will give them the most impact. And we go from there. And even though we may only focus on 1 or 2 things, we create a plan for what that difference looks like in the other areas of their life.
Coach, how much does this sound like what we do?
Absolutely right. It's like it's what it's about. It's defining where they are, what's important, where do they want to go, and making a plan, and then working the plan, and then working the plan, and then working the plan till you get a result, and then pick something else.
Right.
I love the analogy of the shotgun and pick the pellets that are most important. That's cool. I never thought about that before. I like it. You can't pick them all,
No,
right?
you
And
can't.
you pick 10 pellets, like they're all most important. Like, well, they're not. You've got 10 pellets that are going to get 10% of your time, and that's it. Super important to get the right stuff. Yeah, super. It's great stuff.
Right. And we also, and usually like when I have women that come to me or men that come to me from my talks. During the talks, we usually do a morals and values appraisal, and I ask them to pick their top 5 most important things, what they feel are most valuable. And then we have a pie chart and we look at, okay, let's imagine this pie chart is either a 24-hour day or a week. Carve out, what do you spend your time doing? And a lot of times people are surprised that their top 5 doesn't even make where they're spending their time. So what's really important? What you're doing or what you say is important. There's some incongruence.
That's exactly where we started, right? With the burnout, where how can we protect our time? What's most important? What do we need to not feel that burnout? Amazing.
Right.
So Kimberly, what might you say as we wrap up here to somebody who is watching this and like, oh my gosh, I had these symptoms. Oh my gosh, that sounds like me. Like, what do they do?
Right. Well, first I would say go to my website. There's a free at drkimberlywilson.com. There's a free burnout quotient, and you can find out, are you really burnt out or are you just experiencing a little bit of stress? Then I would say, well, based upon the answers of that questionnaire, set up a free call and we can craft, because whether you decide to move forward with me or you want to work it on your own, we come up with a rough plan so that you can begin to take action. So I want to serve whether I'm the person for you or not, because many times I'm not for everybody.
Absolutely. And you can only know that after a little engagement and testing it out, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so I want to share a takeaway that I'm taking away from today's conversation is know your triggers. I mean, that was a huge eye opener for me, is recognize when you're starting to go down that path, and then figuring out, like Coach asked, what's the action after that? But it's progressive, right? So the first step in that process is the awareness of, oh my gosh, I'm doing this. I know that this is not serving me. This is not in my best interest. Let's take some new different action.
Absolutely. Thank you. That even solidifies it more for me, that something to really make sure I focus on for clients. I know mine down.
Absolutely. Even if it's simple, we already know it, right? It's sharpening the saw. And Coach, why don't you sharpen the saw one more time for us? What are you taking away from today?
Yeah, I mean, it's awareness. You've got to know what it is. And even if you don't choose to act on it, knowing what it is starts to build it. And the more that you see it, the more it will become in your mind, the more it will grow. And that somewhere along the line, there'll be enough leverage for you to do something about it. So that's the most important thing. But something you said, actually, Kimberly, and it really is sharpening the score, just a reminder for me, you said that you know what those things are, or you discover it when you're typing. That is a good reminder when you get on your iPad app, like you know what it is, or you start doing it and then you discover it. For me, the reminder there is that you don't always know everything. You've got to continue, you've got to go through the process, take the actions, and you'll discover along the way. But you can't get the result without starting. And you're not going to know what all the answers are when you start. It's just go through the process. I think that's applicable for many things, but at least like to know where you are, what's going on, like just ask yourself the questions, go through a process. Like even if you're not answering the right question for start, the first question will lead to the second question, which will eventually lead to the right place where you can take some action and feel good about it. So thank you for that.
All right, thank you. And I'd like to share my takeaway from when we first talked, Coach Josh. And I hadn't done my vision board in a while. You talked a lot about vision for my business, and I'm looking at it right now. and so that's been such a helpful reminder to keep me focused. It seems like a tiny little thing, but it actually targets my actions and reminds me what to do, what's important and what's BS.
That's so awesome. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, a lot of what we seek is clarity. How do we know what the most important things are that we can spend our time doing? And if it's in alignment with what's important to us, what's right in front of us. So yeah, it's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kimberly, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate this conversation, and we'll see everybody on next week's edition of Truth Seekers.
Thank you once again.